Hi there, everyone. This is Jackie Martin with BMore Learning, and this is our pop-up positivity interview. We've got a very special friend of mine named Brett Kleffner here, and he has been in the training and development and learning and space for decades, and just has so much wisdom that he's going to share with us today. And I just wanted to share, Brett, real quick. I want you to introduce yourself a little bit more, but I did want to say that we've had Brett to come speak to our parents of BMore, just to teach us more about how to be the best kind of parent we can be. And this is his book, The Graphene Parent, so it's available on Amazon. But you know, Brett, you're going to be talking about people in general, let alone parenting skills and what it takes. So first, tell us a little bit more about you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I am glad to do anything that Jackie asked me to do, because I know it's going to be a winning combination. So I'd say probably the only thing left to really understand is that in my years of teaching, I've learned that the best ways are often to have somebody articulate back to you what matters and resonates with them. That's when true learning actually takes place. I started teaching 10th graders, taught sophomore English in the late 90s. And I'm sure I learned a lot more than I ever taught. But that was a great experience. And then that translated into corporate America and the leadership training around the globe. So had a lot of conversations with a lot of leaders at different levels. And ultimately, a few paradigms kind of keep showing up consistently over and over and over. And the leaders, which I would define as anybody with any influence, regardless of title or not, how well they manage these few paradigms end up being more successful or not.
Yes. Well, it's so interesting. I mean, we are in really interesting, unique times. My kids asked me the other day, they said, well, you know, what's it been like this before? And I'm saying nothing. I mean, truly, we are in unprecedented times. And I think this is kind of where the metal gets made. Whether that's with leaders or just, you know, as human beings, sort of the best and worst of us could sometimes get exaggerated. And so what you and I had a conversation about there being a gap between the way people even want to behave or think or feel and the way they really are. And so some of that discussion, I wish you would sort of expound on that, whether that's coming from a leader perspective in this day and age, or just as a human being. What do you think? Tell us more about that whole gap.
Thank you for that. And I think probably the most important thing to keep in mind is that the most important leadership job we can ever accomplish is how well we lead ourselves. And so to the degree I can count on myself that I can come through, I follow, you know, all the things I would expect of anybody that either reports to me or I influence, kids or whatever. It always comes back to they're going to watch how well I'm leading myself, and that's going to speak volumes for what kind of impact I'm going to have as a leader. So to that point, this gap Jackie and I were talking about is in any situation, especially when there's no emotions involved, it's easy to understand what should be done. What's the right thing to do? Many of us professionals have been asked to do, for example, case studies. And so you read the script and it's very clear what should happen. And so you articulate that and you get your grade and everybody is dazzled with your leadership brilliance. The real challenge is when you're emotionally charged and you don't see it coming, you don't have time to stop and really read it. And so what we know we should be doing, even though we can figure it out pretty quickly, we don't deliver on that because of 1,000 other reasons, from politics to self-dialogue to whoever's influencing you and you them. It's complicated, and appropriately so.
Well, Brett, let me ask you this. So what do you think, because I think we are in odd times where this is probably coming out in us more, but I think it happens all the times that we kind of lose track of that inner leadership part.
Mhm.
and we're just kind of flying through our schedules. And maybe even before, it was even worse because we just were, if you're like, most leaders are like me, is that I'm really tightly scheduled and I've got too much on my plate, too much on my mind. And so then the things I know I even should do, I start sort of letting go because my schedule or time or how much I've overcommitted has
Mhm.
made a difference. How do you get a handle on some of that?
Yeah, I love that you bring up that these are indeed such unique times that it's one of the first times we've been asked. I'll speak for myself. I've been asked to not have so much to do what I would call what you explained so well. I call the tyranny of the urgent. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's the ultimate trump card on anything that I know is not urgent but is important. And I can say, well, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, I'm too busy. And and that's where I get
Mm-hmm.
into this. If I do that long enough, it's a stress bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes more stress. I'm dealing with pressure, but in an unhealthy way. So I think to get ahead of that curve, I think we're kind of gifted with this little reprieve. And of course, you can create
Mm-hmm.
this in any climate condition or pandemic or not, is take the time to really consider from afar what I need and should be doing. And then even if I'm not doing it, it's not all or nothing, it's all or something. And as long as
Mm-hmm.
I'm just doing something, I have to measure the progress I'm making towards my ultimate goal. And then when I do that, it creates its own momentum and I'm quicker to close the gap. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of times, perfectionists, if anybody out there besides me, I see what it should look like ultimately, and I'm here. And unless I can get it perfect on the first try, I don't try. And
Well,
so,
okay, so let me ask you about that too, because I think in these times, I think a lot of people are trying to measure their productivity right now based on what they used to be,
mm-hmm,
and falling short over and over again because, well, it's just different. We've got distractions at the house. We don't have all the same equipment. We don't have the same interaction, etc. But how do you, how do you keep from letting that perfectionism stall you out or paralyze you?
mm-hmm. I think probably what's worked for me ultimately was understanding the notion that it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be an attempt. It's back to the all or something.
Mhm.
I also am aware more and more that if I'm truly going to get my head and I'm going to start using that drive to have a lot to do and a lot of production and a lot of results to show for it, I have list. I've started keeping track of my done list. So even though I didn't get the things done that I thought were important on this side of my roster, um, I uh, I prepared and delivered a meal and cleaned up afterwards for my family. I took the dog for a walk 3 times, including 6 poop bags. So congratulations to me.
Woo-hoo!
I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but if I don't do that at the end of the day, I'm like, I didn't get anything done. And it's
Yes,
disheartening. So to
right.
stay positive, you have to keep track of things that are going well. And
Mm.
the gift I give my family by being present. I listen to my daughter read her story out loud that she's writing. And as a 6th grader, it's impressive. So I just dropped everything and listened. That counts.
Mm.
That's what I'm getting done. So oftentimes, if I measure in arrears what I've done well throughout the day,
Hmm.
it's easy to see the success in the day.
Well, and so you were talking about your kids, and you have 4 kids, right?
Mhm. Good.
And so you were telling me before we started recording a little bit about what you guys are doing to build in some of that structure,
Mhm.
so you're feeling like you're accomplishing stuff. Would you mind just kind of telling a couple of the handlebars you guys are putting on your
Yes,
structure?
thank you, thank you. And it kind of builds right into the perfection thing, right? Like I know how I would want it to run if it was the perfect family on the perfect schedule and everybody was thriving. Um, and I just set some simple parameters, and we kind of all did at the same time. But some things like at 10 o'clock, shoulders on mattress, lights out. You can lay there awake all you want, but that's when the day is over. 7 o'clock, we're getting up. So if you want to go to bed earlier, you can. It's much easier to get a kid up than it is to try to get him to go to sleep.
Mm.
So eventually that'll right itself. We also put some parameters around screen time, where we know that they get 2 hours of screen time a day and nothing until 3 o'clock, after 3
Mm.
o'clock. So now they're having to schedule and make sense of how they're going to manage that.
Mhm.
My kids came up with this amendment that if they have a whole day of no screen time, they get an extra hour the next day. great. That's 3 hours in 2 days instead of 4. So everybody wins and they get a chance to learn, like Jackie pointed out, a little delayed gratification. So that's all we have right now. And we put a few benchmarks in for meal plans. So everybody knows that we eat lunch at noon, we eat dinner at 5.
Hmm.
The rest of it, snack smart.
Right. Yeah, but it sounds like you gave them some freedom to do a little, like you said, an amendment. And that helps everybody feel like they're a part of the decision making. And yet, I think those parameters are important. Now, you guys have homeschooled for a
Mm-hmm.
while. So I think sometimes some families who've had that experience probably had some of those things kind of baked into their day. But a lot of families didn't. And so trying to hear if what they should be doing to corral the work that has to be done by the students and their own work.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you would suggest, whether that's the adult work or the student work, that might
Mm-hmm.
be helpful?
Mm-hmm. I think probably the biggest difference that I can do at teaching kids from home that I can't get in the classroom when I send them to school is right after they finish the lesson, they've done their work and they're pretty independent. The software is pretty self-explanatory. Heck, they know more about oftentimes than I do electronic wise. So ultimately, at the end of whatever lesson is, I have them teach me back. Like, what did you learn? How did you do it? And even them just saying it back. And again, I can't jump in and say, I don't have to trump it. I don't have to better it. It's not a teachable moment. It's just asking the question and just listening to them explain it to me. It just doubles down on what they learned. And they get a chance to feel like, look at me, I'm doing my own thing. So
Love that. Well, you know
really,
what? That's a good one for all the time. We know so many people in adult learning. I know it's the same for kids, really. The more you get people to say it or turn on and teach somebody else, so they act like they're teaching you whatever it was they learned. First off, some of the stuff they know more than, like you said, than we do, not just about technology, but math and some other areas.
Sure.
But having to asking them to share with you as a parent what it is they just worked on, huge benefit to them, because like you said, they get to double down on, they've done it, now they've shared it, that solidifies it a little more. Any other ideas for parents and like how everybody's able to play well in the sandbox?
I think I think playing the sandbox, well phrased. I think it's a matter of having fun. And I think anybody would say, yeah, I want to enjoy life. I want it to be fun. I want it to be, but if you're not intentional about setting that as how you're going to believe, think, and operate, it's easy. Again, the tyranny, the urgent, the stress of, everything's in change and flux. It's an easy recipe to get stressed out and pretty serious. So I guess my best advice is set that as an intention. If you can create ways to measure that you're having fun, how many times did you laugh in a day? How many times did your kids laugh in a day? Whatever it is, that can be super valuable rather than just leaving it to chance. I say, plan fun stuff, watch comedians, watch kids, do stuff that's fun by design, and then start measuring that.
Well, so then let's take this full circle and apply that back to where you started talking about leaders, and leaders need to lead themselves first, and to try to keep that gap between what they know they should do and what they're actually doing as small as possible. So that whole intentionality part, how does that apply maybe in the new normal of working as a leader right now? Any parallels there?
You mean the deliberateness of creating a fun, engaging home life,
Could be,
or whatever it is, or even in a work study or in a workplace. I mean, sure. Some of the measuring strategies I've seen work are something as simple as putting 5 coins in a right pocket, and every time you laugh, put it in your left pocket. See if you can fill up your left pocket at the end of the day. I've had it where the other people around me at the end of the day at a meal, I ask them, how many times did you see me laugh? How many times? And everybody keeps score of everybody else's times that they heard them laugh. And at first you can expect crickets because no one's paying attention. But after the 3rd or 4th time, you're looking, and because you want to have something to say at dinner when you caught someone laughing. So again, the perfectionist says the day is a joy. I'm skipping along. It's a Disney film, happy ending, everybody wins. The reality is that's rarely, if ever, the case. So if I get one coin into my pocket, I'm not measuring the 4 coins that didn't. I'm measuring that I got one today.
Mm, nice. Well, and I just think in terms of productivity at work, and that just trying to apply that same notion
Mm-hmm.
of expectations. Because when we started talking about here's where we are and here's where we should be, is this what we need to move, or is this what we need to move? And I'm maybe in this era it's a little of both.
Yeah.
The
Great.
expectations need to change right now. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I think that there's 2 different ways to run this measurement, this gap. One is on productivity. I need to deliver 38 widgets by the end of the week, and then I can just measure that. But ultimately, what's going to create that success is my behavior, attitude, resourcefulness, hours put in, working smart, doing the right thing that I can't influence the widgets. So so I can do measurable behaviors that create the ultimate goal. 2 different scales.
Right.
And then my belief, what I'm thinking, how I'm behaving is going to drive my productivity, which is going to create the results. So it's, if I start measuring everything on just results and I'm not hitting them, it's a recipe for stress. If I know that I'm doing everything in my belief system and how I'm operating to create measurable work, then it's going to create the results. Then at least there's a sense of momentum. And if I'm not hitting results, I can backtrack and say, well, where is it that I'm missing, and how can I improve? And if you have the right working relationship with whoever you're reporting to, that's a fair conversation, because they want you to hit your results and you want to hit your results. No one's trying to sandbag here. So let's figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that conversation, especially in today's environment, and working remotely, which may for many people remain the same even after things change back. I mean, there may be a lot of organizations or individuals whose roles are now being molded at home and will continue that way. So that relationship you just spoke of between the leader and the person working with them, you're right, that has to be really collaborative, especially when we're not in the same office, right? And those expectations need to be super clear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, again, just, necessity is the mother of all invention. So if you haven't had a conversation with your boss just once a month for an hour to check in, down to you have someone who's micromanaging the living tar feathers out of you, and anywhere in between, this is really one of those times when you can say, given these circumstances, I just want to make sure I'm hitting the mark, delivering what you need to see. And, what are you saying? How am I doing? And so have that conversation. And it can be a conversation about the less you micromanage me, the more productive I can be. Let me show you. To I see you once a month, and is everything how you want it to be? It's just conversation. And as long as it's always clear that both of you are trying to get the results that you need, then it's just 2 smart people tugging on the same rope in the same direction. Then things really are quite plausible.
Well, I love that. I love what you just, that little analogy about 2 smart people tugging on the same rope in the same direction, because I think that really is a feel that everybody's looking for. So whether that's from their leader or whether that's from their colleagues, and especially in this environment when we're feeling a little separated. Just one more question for you about that whole, how can we build that kind of sense of connectedness and everybody moving in the same direction in this kind of setting? Any ideas or tips for us there?
I think probably the first thing that popped in my head is just taking the time to have a Zoom call instead of a phone call. Having a phone call instead of an email, having an email instead of a text. There's some stuff that you just need to get information to somebody, just get them the information, and that's what email does. But if you find yourself trying to write a 3 paragraphs to try to tell how you're feeling, and you're running it by your colleagues, is this tone right? Are they going to misunderstand? If you're in that conversation, skip the email, just call them. And with today's technology, again, you get a chance to see somebody face to face. So it's not ideal, but it's far better than what we used to have, even however many years ago now. So the courage, I'll speak for myself. The courage is to is to send the Zoom request and go through with it.
Yeah.
Once
And have that conversation.
Yeah. Once the screen pops up and everybody's audioed in, that's easy. It's the courage it takes sometimes to call your boss up or call a direct report that's not performing, and say, we got to do something about the results, because everybody's dealing with the same situation. So we got to get on the same team and start trying to figure out how to make what needs to happen.
Right. Right. So there was a really great nugget on how perhaps to bridge that gap between what you should do and maybe been putting off as a leader, and what you're doing, and just trying to find that courage to take the one step. So I have one last thing I'm really wanting to ask everybody, and this comes from a colleague of mine who has a phrase that says, "What if it's better?" What if it's better? I mean, that's her, I've had her on. That's Nina Aubert, and I'm just going to ask this of everybody I talk to, because this is pop-up positivity, and we want to leave everybody with that sense. And so it could be around leadership, or it could be around parenting, or just life in general right now. In what area, or what could you imagine things could be like if what if it's better? Is there something that comes to mind as an example of something that you might think, hey, it could really be better? Anything come to mind for you?
So you're looking for what is the it, or what is better?
Yeah.
Okay. What if it was better? I suppose probably what I immediately defaulted to is, what if the relationships that I have with the people that most influence me in my career, most influence me in my family life, what if it was stronger? What if it was more transparent and flexible? What if it had more strength and resiliency? As soon as the relationships strengthen, or even back to the original point, as soon as I can start coming through for myself and close that leadership gap that I'm leading myself with, I would say almost more than anything, it would be a tough argument to think of something more important, are those relationships with self and others. If that's better, then really it eliminates failure as an option, because there is no such thing. That's what all the posters are trying to tell us. There's no failure, just, it's just a lesson. And if I truly have someone on my team, then it's, it's fun. It's a whole different animal.
Nice. Nice. Well, I thank you, Brett, for your time and being a part of this today. I wanted to remind you, he's the author of The Graphene Parent. And actually, Brett, didn't you say that all the proceeds from this book, it's on Amazon, goes to, tell everybody where it goes to?
Yep, it goes to orphans in Ethiopia. My third daughter is adopted from Addis Ababa. And so we've made a mission to put $100,000 into the orphan home. So it'd be amazed how far $10 goes every time. So that's what it's for.
Nice. Well, great to talk to you, Brett, and say hello to your family. We just appreciate you so much being part of Pop-Up Positivity. This is Jackie Martin with BMore. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jackie.